Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about, well, a common discussion, that is the Mary Sue. But I think there is more to the conversation of the Mary Sue than what usually gets brought up, because there is a lot of, I think, unfair criticism that only happens one way, and you'll see what I mean. But I got an article that I found like a year ago from Bounding into Comics about Lauren Chen talking about Mary Sue's, and so then I want to use that kind of as a springboard to get into the other parts of the same conversation, of a similar conversation, regarding the everyman, girl bosses, and something that I have no other way of describing other than Daedalus the Conqueror style male power fantasies. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through LMY, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in the creativity of this community with what you guys submitted. The only deviation was this month so far because proximity to the cringe stream. So I accidentally forgot to mention the extension on that, and I am sorry, but usually it is attempted to be the first Monday video of the month. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit your first chapter and your cover, they will be read here on the channel at a random interval to hopefully help more readers find your work, because they're out there. It's just getting them to know that you exist and giving them that delicious first taste where they can't put the rest of the book down. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books and, you know, say what you gotta say about them. I expect the worst. You can get them at any of your favorite places to get books, including your local library. I also accept hate mail in the form of comments, book reviews that dress down every personality flaw, perceived or real, and Mashima merchandise sent directly to my P.O. box. Just FYI. With that said, let's get into the topic. Now, unfortunately, I don't have internet on this computer that I'm recording on at the moment, so, like, I've got the article pulled up on a separate computer. So I'm not going to be able to, like, put it on the screen as I talk about it, but I will link it in the description below to follow through if you want to check out the Bounding into Comics article. But it's titled "Think Mary Sues Are Going Away, Lauren Chen Reveals Why They Aren't." So one of the biggest things you might know that I have an issue with in general is when political opiners think that they can understand creativity, and it includes in the creative sphere. So one of the things that you might know if you come around this channel much is that I have a big disagreement with political opiners and political agents in general who try to push their way in or force their way into the creative spaces, and that includes the people at the heads of a lot of these bigger properties that are then destroying the properties by inserting politics. It is a very different thing to be political versus creative. You can be creatively political, but you're not telling creative stories when you're pushing politics. There's also such a difference as bad writing and political writing. But one thing that I've recognized specifically in the last couple of years is that the politically minded person completely does media analysis completely different than what actual media analysis or literary analysis is supposed to be like. Often it'll start assigning stuff as being supportive or against, good or bad, depending on what part they play in the story, as opposed to just seeing a story for what it is, seeing people in the story for what they are. You know, where a right-wing person might read a story that has a morally gray character as the main character and then be like, this book is supporting evil and saying that evil is good. A left-wing person might see a character in a book that is like racist and then say the author is racist. So it completely misses the point of literature or books or television, where characters are imperfect or perfect. Some require a lot. Actually, it's oddly funny that both seem to require a book to be a morality play of sorts. It just has to be their morality and show it in their way and punish people the way they want. And they kind of forget that the author's touch, the author's perspective is always going to be in there in some way or another, but it's not necessarily dictating that this is good and this is bad. That is a morality play. Anyway, stuff gets taken, and stories and movies and and this isn't to say that there's not a place for political analysis, because I do think there is, and I also think that works of art can be commandeered by propagandists who try to use that medium to confuse people and create propaganda instead of art, to create influence instead of storytelling that is supposed to bring us together. That's been one of my biggest pet peeves with the infiltration of super politics in the creative spaces for a long time. Not just recently. I noticed it obviously when I started getting into creative spaces back in college when I got into theater, and I couldn't say anything in theater because my politics didn't match the politics of my peers. And then I got into creative writing university spaces, and it was even worse because it was during 2016, 2014 through 2016, and I got disowned by certain people during that time, and it ruins creativity. And then you end up in creative circles like you do to do critique groups, and you've got the different politics influencing how people are reading your work politically instead of creatively, and then saying whether or not you're allowed to write something because of who you are or what you are, or they're assigning political meaning to just tropes, which this also the tropes. So I'm totally getting off track here. But so that's like how it gets really annoying. And so then talking about Lauren Chen opining on this, she's bringing a political lens to a creative issue and ascribing political stuff to what should just be a creative thing. Because honestly, what I do on the channel here is when I read books, I try to maintain the integrity of what the vision is in the book that I see. It's not necessarily what the author was trying to go for, but I can tell you what I see and why I see what I see. If it's correct, this is why I ask for other people's opinions, because it's interesting to see what we take away from stories in completely different ways and why. It reveals how we think. It reveals the clues that we pick up in the text or the clues that we miss in the text, because we are looking for certain things based on who we are and how we think. And I think you run into, and by doing that, I can still tell whether I enjoy a story or not, regardless of whatever politics are in it. I should be able to tell the logic of the story or the characters of the story within the story outside of politics. And I don't want to have to ascribe politics to the author or the creator in order to determine whether or not I like something. And I think that's something that has bled in from the political spectrum in general, of people trying to purity test and make sure that the creator of something agrees with them before they're able to before they're even pretending to be interested in it. Because it's not about the story, it's not about actual good stories, it's about who controls the power and if your opinions are being funded by whatever. That's a side thing. That's a side thing, just to preface this, talking about Lauren Chen and why I think why I just don't like it. The other thing is, when we're talking about Mary Sue's, when we're talking about the everyman, when we're talking about girl bosses, we're talking about tropes. And tropes aren't necessarily bad on their own. Tropes are just groups of repeated pattern behavior or elements that go together that create this recognizable archetype. And, a girl boss that people like is a mommy dommy. So Mary Sue's don't start off being terrible, because you can do something unique and fun with a Mary Sue. Empress Teresa is both a Mary Sue and a girl boss, and she is the greatest. I don't care what anybody says. She is the greatest. Like nobody's ever seen. Deserves all of the titles. So then it bothers me when people use the ideas of tropes existing as a way to be like, oh, I identified a pattern in this story. Now it's a bad story because it has a trope. I don't think anything is inherently bad like that. And I think it becomes too easy to just dismiss and criticize by using that kind of thing when they're going to exist either way. Getting into the actual topic of the story after all of that prefacing, I'm sorry. One of the things that I've noticed recently is just how hard female characters and female authors and female writers in general are so scrutinized. And that's not to say that male writers are not scrutinized, because everybody is scrutinized depending on whether or not people like you. But I am noticing that in certain spaces, I've seen it in the Comicsgate space, I've seen it in literature space, that if you are a female author, then it is assumed that you must self-insert. I have seen this idea so many times where people say female authors cannot write. In the same way that in the literary space, I've also seen female authors say that males can't write and that men have no ability to write females whatsoever. When what we're actually looking at is not a male-female issue, it is actually just a bad writing issue. I've even brought it up in spaces where somebody says, hey, this person wrote, oh my gosh, I can't believe this woman wrote like a man writing women. Think about what you're saying. you're just recognizing bad writing, but you're using being male as an insult. In the same way that some go, oh look, this woman wrote a self-insert. Well, duh, she would, because all women write self-inserts. Can we not make bad writing into a gendered issue? There's also the fact that sometimes people do autobiographical or semi-autobiographical fiction, like Bret Easton Ellis does that. You could consider what he does somewhat of a self-insert because it is fiction. But even the character of his newest book, The Shards, is named Bret Easton Ellis. So, like, can we calm down on insulting people for immutable characteristics? Because all you do is create self-hatred and resentment and a bias against it, whether it's men or women. And we need to talk about actual writing things. And that writers are different, feeding different audiences, feeding different stories, telling different stories for different people. And that's fine. But we need to recognize bad writing is bad writing and not go, oh, it's because you're a woman, or oh, it's because you're a man, and then you should not be allowed to do this ever, whatever. Replace whatever demographic with what you want. So getting into the article, I wish I could post it on the screen. Getting into the article, it starts out with, Mary Sue's make terrible protagonists and indeed destroy any story they are in. I would argue against that because I think that you can use anything for good, but I think that if you're just a bad writer, you're going to suffer. But that doesn't mean that they still don't have a fan base, and Lauren Chen found a Twitter thread with some interesting responses that reveal why Mary Sue isn't going away anytime soon. So apparently, it makes for a terrible story, but people still enjoy it. So I would say that it doesn't make for a terrible story, it just makes for a specific kind of fan base. But again, in some spaces, you end up with literary criticism or media criticism being like there is only a subjective good and a subjective bad of the story, and they don't really take into consideration that people can like things that are not great. Like, again, Empress Teresa is an excellent example of something that is not literary high anything. It's like a B movie, but it's great. It's entertaining. There's not a problem with something just because it is not whatever. And you saw this too with last week's video where the dude said, hey, write something as good as Dante's Inferno and then come and criticize whatever. My guy, some people don't like Dante's Inferno. Some people don't like that, like, whatever is in there. And you end up with these people that think that there's specific standard of this is what's good, this is what's not good, and if you have a Mary Sue, well, then it's always bad, and everybody that likes it is just dumb. Can we have a little more nuance in this? This is also something that I feel like comes with a political perspective, because it's like, I'm right, you're wrong, so everything that I say is correct, and it's just you're bad if you don't agree. And it happens in everything. There's so little nuance in political discussion. In a video published to her Mediaholic YouTube channel on December 8th, Chen highlighted a Twitter thread by user @Joshua Lysick that provided an explanation to why Mary Sue's don't work. The thread also, I wonder why so many Mary Sue stories exist if they just don't work. There's something about them that is attractive, which is why people continue to write them. I think that's more worth talking about than, like, just straight up saying they don't work. The thread also identified characters such as Galadriel from Rings of Power, Rey from Star Wars franchise, and Captain Marvel from the eponymous movie as Mary Sue's. I would also, so in this situation, we've got all of the big franchises that these same people have been getting angry at for years. And that's not to dismiss their perspective and how they feel. But can I get some media analysis that is not so bogged down by emotional baggage of nostalgia? Like, you can dislike Rings of Power and Marvel and DC and all of that, but when I'm hearing about these same franchises again and again and again that are just being destroyed, and the references are never outside of that. It's always Star Wars, Marvel, Disney, Rings of Power, maybe Twilight every now and then. Can you talk about something contemporary? Talk about something that is outside of what you're currently looking at, because I'm not sure that it's a Mary Sue issue as much as, one, you're emotionally charged towards decisions against these people because you don't like them. It's the same thing that, like, when you're in love with somebody, they're way more attractive than when you're not in love with somebody, and then when you find out somebody is a terrible person, it doesn't matter how hot they are, you start seeing them as really disgusting. In general, not all the time, but in general, your perception of somebody makes somebody either more or less attractive. And so if you've already got that emotional baggage, that emotional response to people, then you're going to already see the worst of everything. And so I would like to take some of this media analysis away from the things that are already so emotionally and politically charged if you want me to take you seriously, because I just can't when you're already so angry at this stuff. It's always going to be the worst case scenario. Lysik's explanation is rather innocuous. He clearly explains, as others have done, why protagonists who have no character flaws or challenges to overcome don't work, and why they cause a story to fail from the start. Hence why the aforementioned stories with their female leads failed. Yet, despite the tameness of it all, the thread unsurprisingly received some harsh responses. I just gotta say, it's also ridiculous in general how it's like, oh, some people disagreed with me. I just got backlash. Bro, you put something out in public, it's not always backlash, it's not always criticism. Sometimes it's just people having a discussion. But again, everybody kind of in the political space, it feels like a lot of stuff comes down to it's always about flame war, it's always about making yourself a victim when somebody disagrees with you. It's just, I don't think that it is. I think that it is an exaggeration. It's hyperbole because that's what sells in that sphere. And so then you're never really having a true discussion. Quote, but what I thought was just as interesting as his posts were the posts responding to it in shockingly negative ways, Chen said in her video. Because honestly, whether you agree with Joshua or not, like that characters like Ray are poorly written, I feel like it'd be a pretty big stretch to call him sexist for his opinion. And yet that's exactly what happened on the internet.com. Again, stop being surprised. Like, there are people on internet.com that support child abuse. There are people on internet.com that support literally anything. That's one of the things that the internet has enabled, is that literally everybody's got a voice now. So you're going to find somebody that disagrees with you, and it doesn't really matter. But the fact that the response is, oh, somebody disagrees with the idea of Mary Sue's being bad is shocking to me. Kind of shows a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion, a lack of reaching outside of your base where you think that only you are correct. And so you're surprised to run into somebody who disagrees with you. That reads as out of touch. And everybody's freaking using isms and ists as a way to try to shut other people down. So, like, don't even pretend that it's only going one way. Like I mentioned earlier, you got people on one side saying that no women can do anything, and then you got people on the other side saying no men can do anything, and any criticism is some kind of ist. It's not an honest response. It's not an honest engagement. It shouldn't even be considered for anything. And then it goes, it's 2022 and somebody called me a sexist for disagreeing? Yes, you know this. Don't act so surprised. Just move on and go towards an actual helpful conversation, which is not rehashing the name calling. She then cited the series of responses to Lysik's tweet, where the users apparently took exception to what he wrote. Indeed, at times those replying resorted to calling him names such as fragile and so forth. All in all, they were quite typical of these types of comments regularly seen on Twitter. For her part, Shen went into detail on why there was nothing wrong with Lysik's thread. So it's turning what is a literary issue or a media issue into a political issue by not talking about the actual, what is a Mary Sue, what purpose do they have, where did they come from, who likes them, why do people like them, instead of what are stories in which they have been successful. It becomes making a statement about a person, and then all of the conversation revolves around defending the person against those statements, or looking at the other people being like, hey, why are you so low-brained that you think this? Anyway, the thread includes Joshua Lysik saying, Ray, Galadriel, Captain Marvel, Bo Peep, why are modern female heroes so unlikable, and what does that mean for us professional writers? It starts with Mary Sue. It's not misogynistic or anti-woman to look at a character, a fictional character, and say, okay, it doesn't seem like you have any flaws or weaknesses, therefore I don't see how you can grow in a story. Number one, I've seen in, so a couple of things on this. I've seen a couple of people say, hey, a character does not need to grow in a story. I have actually seen a lot of people say that specifically male characters do not need to have flaws and do not need to go through a character arc in order to have a story. So then why are we now being like, oh, well, female characters have to have flaws to then go through an arc? It's different types of stories. Do you want a plot-centered story, an action-centered story, or a character-driven story? And then, again, that brings us to another type of audience, is some people read for self-insertion. So they want characters in which they can feel related to, in which they can ride that power fantasy. If you look at the difference between the people that enjoyed A Court of Mist and Fury and the people that don't, is the people that inserted themselves into A Court of Mist and Fury and then felt like they were Feyre, had much more enjoyment than the people who are on the outside watching the behaviors, not self-inserting. So it's a difference of like, a voyeuristic reader versus an experienced reader, an escapist reader, where they just want to go inside of the book. And that's also not something that any of this media analysis ever takes into consideration, is that people approach media for different purposes. They want characters for different purposes. If you have an extremely flawed character, a lot of people that self-insert do not want to read that flawed character because they cannot relate. They do not want to relate. It's uncomfortable. It's unlikable. Like, a lot of the time in Bret Easton Ellis's books, his characters are not likable. His main characters, his protagonists, not likable. If you're going in there wanting to like that character, you're either probably semi-psychopathic because you literally think you're Patrick Bateman, Mr. Edgy Boy, or you're not going to feel for that character because you're there for the experience of this person who is so unlike yourself. But not everybody reads that way. So yes, flaws and weakness make a certain type of writing. But it's not the only type of writing. Is it the kind of writing that I prefer? Yes, it is. But I think that this approach is too black and white for what is media analysis. So they're saying, well, I need you to have flaws. Okay, what flaws? What flaws do you want? Approach the individual character with specific flaws that fit their story, that fit their personality, and go from there. But it might end up that that character, that the things that you were asking for were not part of that story. And so then criticize it in that way. But Mary Sue's, in my opinion, Mary Sue's flaws are often low self-esteem and or egotism, funny enough. A lot of egotism. If you look at Empress Teresa, she has such an ego that everybody is afraid to offend her because she could destroy the world if they actually make her upset. So the media tells people to stop making fun of her. It's like the perfect use of a Mary Sue. I swear. It is, oh my gosh. If people would just analyze that for like what it is instead of being some sort of literary meme, it's great. So then then Lauren Chen turns this into a conversation about bigotry, instead saying it's not bigoted, hateful, or a rejection of women as people to look at Rey from Star Wars and say, hey, the fact that she was so strong at the start of it kind of feels like her main purpose was really just wish fulfillment or self-insertion. And it's funny because as upset as the feminists were with Joshua's thread, some of them were also simultaneously confirming it. Okay, so stop bringing in political words to talk about media analysis. This is why I don't trust political people to do media analysis, because they always have to reframe it. If you're going to talk about Rey's lack of flaws and how she ultimately knows how to do something, you don't have to use political language to discuss it in literary terms of why it is bad storytelling. You don't. And it just shuts people off to having that conversation with you because you're using political language to spice things up, to make it into something that it's not, instead of talking about the character. Wish fulfillment and self-insertion are common things in books. Read more books. They're common things in stories. Look at more stories than freaking Star Wars, Disney, and Marvel, okay? Because y'all don't. And then you go, oh, look at this. Women can't write because they just do self-insertions. Okay. Let's talk about the everyman real quick. What is the everyman archetype? The everyman archetype is a mundane and unremarkable character designed to be a stand-in for the reader or audience. They don't display any outward powers or extraordinary strengths, but they are humble, compassionate, and kind. Through the everyman archetype, the reader is able to insert their own self-image into the story and live up alongside that character. Very commonly, the everyman character is used in harem stories, especially anime, where you've got kind of the nerd that is very plain, that is very undriven, that has nothing going on in his life, but then all of a sudden, all of these women, like, are all fighting over him. Often you'll have situations where he is married to this super powerful girl boss, mommy-dommy, goddess of sorts. It is a very popular thing. But do we hear about the everyman archetype being a problem with self-inserts and wish fulfillment? No, we don't. And I don't know why the Mary Sue gets it, but the everyman doesn't. They're just the same archetype, but for different audiences. But only one gets dragged constantly. Is that because the Mary Sue is on some television and movie shows? See, that's why it feels like it's so specific to, like, dragging what is in the mainstream that already has emotional baggage to it, because it feels like ruining somebody's childhood. So some qualities that stand out about the everyman archetype is they are empathetic for others, which is what you see in the Mary Sue, and then the girl bosses like Feyre, where they say that they're empathetic. Do I believe that they're empathetic? No, not really. They believe in equality. They're grounded and hardworking. They're just, sometimes they're just that loser that just can't get it right. Same with Farah, grounded and hardworking. How do we meet Farah at the beginning of Akatar? Oh, she is hunting a wolf, hunting for food to go and bring back to her family because her family needs her to feed them. They're humble and easily satisfied. Farah would say that she's easily satisfied. I would not. They're kind but flawed. I bet if you asked the creator of Star Wars with Rey, they would tell you what they think Rey's flaws are. Now, you don't have to agree that they're flaws, but I bet you're looking at the character differently. And then they may lack drive or ambition, because the everyman doesn't have to do anything. Everything just falls into his lap. Oh, you're running a hotel? Well, now here are a bunch of aliens that want to have sex with you and are all fighting over you, and oh, your uncle just died? Well, now you are in charge of an all-women's boarding house. Yes, that's lovely. I only have old references, okay, but they're all over the place. There are so many examples of the harems and these stories that just have the regular guy who just falls in and becomes the thing. Oh, isn't that the basis of isekai too? It's like a regular guy who then just gets teleported into this magical thing and now he is the king. It just exists. And, like, I'm not necessarily a fan of certain tropes, and so I don't seek them out. And Mary Sue is the same thing. But then when it's all focused constantly, the same criticism is focused on the same stories again and again and again, where it's all the same people, I don't take it seriously anymore. Chen later cited a tweet by user @TommyStella who said, "I don't want to actually jump into the Mary Sue discourse, but I do want to say that I don't care if she's a Mary Sue. I don't care if a grown man thinks she's a well-written character. I care about this." He then attached a montage of photographs of little girls, some dressed up as Rey, meeting with adults, one or more, who may be original Rey actress Daisy Ridley, who are also dressed as Rey. Shen found that quite telling. And again, this goes back to the idea that the main purpose of storytelling nowadays is just self-representation. It's only a good story if you can see yourself in it. That's why you have to have all of these different diversity quotas. What these people don't get is that you don't need to share characteristics with a character in order to see yourself in them. I guess it's cute that little girls like Rey and that they're dressing up as her, but let's face it, there are also many other characters who aren't women who are actually well written that little girls also dress up as. So it's just different interests. It's not political necessarily. You can dislike a character all that you want. The kind of characters that Lauren Chen likes, I may not like. I think that a lot of people in the political sphere will actually not like some of the characters that I write because they are not perfect. Some of them are imbeciles. Like, freaking talk to me. Go in media analysis, Kaylee, okay? Go and tell me how Casey doesn't deserve anything because he is a bad person. People like terrible people. People self-insert as terrible people. It's a form of self-expression, but instead the political media analysis people cannot look at writing of a character as anything but a political move in everything that they do. You do not have to like Rey. But why are you looking at little girls who like Rey and then saying, well, why are you dressing like that? You don't have to like that. There are a lot of people that like self-inserts. There are a lot of people that do not like self-inserts. I prefer stories where the characters are strong, stand on their own, and are not self-inserts. I think that self-insert characters, when they're not something that's like autobiographical or semi-autobiographical, when they are just wet, very characterless characters, because you're supposed to put yourself in them, and so they don't make any strong decisions. They don't want the reader to dislike them, so they don't do anything strong in a bad way. I think those are more boring. But I'm not going to go after somebody who likes that sort of thing. There are different types of books for different types of people, different types of characters for different types of people. And it's not this black and white issue that is meant to be looked at from a political lens. She continued, and personally, as someone who does have a daughter and was once a little girl, I would way rather look up to a character like Aragorn, who is a man, even though I'm not, just because he actually displays a lot of virtue. Okay, so in talking about this, did she actually go and ask these little girls what they admire about Rey? Because I bet you she's looking at Rey differently than they are looking at Rey. And you can like Aragorn, but they can also look up to whoever they look up to, or want to dress up as whoever they want to dress up as. This, again, is showing a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion, and a why don't you think like me? This is how I think, so you should think like this. Which is, again, another issue in general with political opining. It doesn't matter what your side is. A lot of it comes down to, I am right, you are wrong, do things my way, or else you're evil. Like, that's a lot of it. She expanded on the difference between the Lord of the Rings character and the Star Wars character. He has trials that he overcomes. He doesn't want to be king, but he has to grow into that role instead of just siding with Rey because, oh, she's a woman, me woman too. Ultimately, Chen's Mediaholic video shows that while Mary Sue characters are terrible, there are still plenty of people who actually like them. Did you ask why they're liked? Did you at all get into why do you like Mary Sue characters? Why do you like this character? Because I don't see any of that here. More importantly, as Hollywood has demonstrated, Mary Sues have the support of the people who count the most, those who are in charge of making stories that reach the widest audiences. So if it reaches the widest audiences, then that would go to say that a lot of people like this type of character. Maybe do some inspection on what clicks about that character to people. So Star Wars will continue to feature Mary Sues. The MCU will continue to feature Mary Sues. Reboots of franchises that people love and don't originally have Mary Sues will continue to feature Mary Sues in their new incarnation. So go and look at other things. This is the other thing that pisses me off about these people, is they will continually complain about Hollywood, who hates them, continually making things that they hate, and then never go outside of that. It's all they talk about. And every other story and every other medium from the legacy entertainment system will continue to feature Mary Sues. That's not true. You ignore everything that is not doing Mary Sues because all that you mentioned in here is MCU and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Those are not the only things that have come out in the last 3 years. Every now and then, news appears that seems to indicate that Hollywood has had enough of people disliking its woke entertainment and that it will do things differently going forward, but that simply will not happen. The people running Tinseltown and the nation at large are committed to that belief and will not change, and Lauren Chen's Mediaholic video is a good reminder of that. Also, you're biased as well. Don't pretend that you're not bounding into comics. I really don't like how they report stuff, but I feel like it's important to show just how terrible all of the sides are on this. So I've already mentioned the Mary Sues and the Everymans. The alternative but similar style of character is the girl boss and the Daedalus the Conqueror, which is the all-powerful OP male character who is the hero, gets everything that he wants, is the one in charge. And I want to mention this very briefly to do this comparison because, again, you get so many people saying that only women do this and Hollywood is doing this. And y'all need to expand your media diet. Like, go read other things. Go and do actual investigation into reading communities, into book communities, into movie communities to see what people like. Because it's obvious that you don't. Because it's obvious that you're only looking at these biggest whatever that you've already dismissed and know are not what you're looking for. But you continue to consume and then go like, why are you like this? That's like me going to an erotica writer and continuously complaining, why is there no character development in here? I mentioned it in the last 5 books. All they do is bang. Where is the character development? Go somewhere else. So, the commonalities with the girl boss and the Daedalus the Conqueror style, Daedalus the Conqueror being a good example from Shad M. Brooks's book, Shadow of the Conqueror. We've got rape in the male power fantasy, you've got rape is constantly involved. It's like, it is part of the society. There is a savior complex in the main character, whether they're a female character or a male main character. Meanwhile, in the girl boss version, you have a lot of servitude to the girl boss, obviously. She is just the one to be worshipped. You've got a lot of saving the girl from the rape. You've also got in Daedalus the Conqueror's sake, it's like rape is the worst thing that could possibly happen to a girl, and also it builds her character and makes her stronger. That's often what the male power fantasy sees in rape victims. You've also got all of the powers, all the OP often comes up with things on the spot. You know, they are the super special. If you look at the girl boss with the 4th wing, she not only gets 1 special dragon, she gets 2 special dragons. And that's the same as Dalen developing the ability to get whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He suddenly randomly develops telepathy just by existing. Thinks he is smarter than everybody else, who nobody else understands the world, nobody else sees the truth but him. And then he has all of the powers, and all of the girls love him, including the NPCs, especially the NPCs who are better than humans. The Stacys, really. I've read those books too. So, girl boss meets whatever the last man who is alive, the woke man. Oh my gosh, that's part of it too. There's a stay tuned. Stay tuned is what's on here as well. I did a book review of that book forever ago. And again, it's like the one guy who is awake to the government conspiracy and he is going to save the freaking world if only he can wake everybody up to how corrupt the government is and the companies are and all of it. Now they either disappear into the Matrix with their lit RPGs or they're Frank from Stay Tuned. Read more. You'll find out that these these stereotypes are not gender specific. A final thing that I want to mention, there are so many others. Feel free to mention elements that you've noticed in girl bosses, the Daedalus the Conqueror OP powers, the Everyman, or the Mary Sue down in the comments below. But another thing is everyone exists to affirm them, or if they're the bad guys, hate them. Often with the girl bosses, you have the cattiness of all of the women hate the girl boss if they're not friends with the girl boss. You've got like Cleo in Lightlark, Clara in Guns and Smoke, where, you know, Bonnie is the girl boss. Generally, I haven't noticed any of the same cattiness in male-written or male-focused power fantasy stories. It's just everybody eventually worships the guy, agrees with the guy, eventually finds that he is right, or he's got a martyrdom thing, like Dalen the Conqueror goes, you're going to let me die, you're going to let me die, but everybody loves him too much to let him die. Even the people who hate him cry when he dies, and then he comes back to life. So, power fantasies just happen. Bad writing just happens. It's not about sex, it's not about race, it's not about sexuality, it's not about anything but it's bad writing, and also the things that you like or don't like are subjective. And so rather than deciding whether somebody likes something or doesn't like something, or their writing is political or their writing is bigotry, maybe go and investigate why people like the things that they like. This is why even when I do book reviews and I say, I didn't like this, but let me know if you'll read it and if you've read it and what you think. It's because we have different experiences and I want to discuss those experiences. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm not going to tell you how to think. I'm going to say, this is what I see. Show me what you see. Even with this video, I don't think I'm right. I think I'm an idiot. I start every video with that now because I'm still learning. But I'm going to tell you what I see and hopefully learn more by sharing perspective and hearing perspective from other people. So with that said, that's the video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have a great weekend. Don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?